Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now here's your host, Roxanne Derhaj.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Authentic Living with Roxanne. Today I have a special guest, Christopher Littlefield, and Christopher's in Chile right now, which he's just moving back to the US, but he's came recommended highly by a colleague of mine, Sarah McVannell, that I do a lot of work with. So Christopher, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Honored to be here, Roxanne.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Christopher. He's done a lot. He has an amazing TEDx talk that I just looked at, which was done in Beirut. He talks about employee recognition, appreciation, and workplace culture. And he's the founder of a company called Beyond Thank You. He's done trainings across 6 continents, and some of his clients are Accenture, the Lebanese Postal Service, Boston Medical Center, amongst others. And he writes for Forbes and Harvard Business Review Ascend. And he's the author of the best-selling book, 75 Plus Team Building Activities for Remote Teams. So I'm going to assume you're kind of busy since everything's gone virtual.
I think that, like everybody, I think that it started out, and I think we hit this point where, okay, maybe March kicked in. Okay, we're going to go work remote for a little bit. Okay, then April came, then May, then June, and then we realized that reality set in that we're not going to go back anytime soon. And then companies started, like Twitter and Facebook and kind of ones that people are like looking at, started saying, we're not going to come back before the end of the year, or we're not going to come back till next year. And so once that started happening, and then once schools didn't go back in the fall, I think there was a point where everybody was just kind of caught in the headlights. Like, we don't know how to deal with this. We're putting together a puzzle that has no picture right now, and the pieces are changing each day. And so there was nothing that we could account for. And I know in your work that factor of uncertainty plays so much into our mental and physical health. I mean, even more so into our mental health, because we're constantly processing. And I think once June hit, people started realizing we're going to be here longer. So those first couple of months, nothing happened. I primarily work as a conference speaker. And I work in conferences or do large group events for hundreds to thousands of people within companies. And so all of those started getting delayed, put off till 2021, 2022. And so when that started happening, I realized, hey, all of these managers that I work with and I support around the world in these companies, we're now having virtual meetings every single day. And they were getting old, they were getting stale. And I've lived and worked virtually, for the most part, for the better part of the last 10 years. And so, as a former camp counselor and Outward Bound instructor and all those things, I know how to come up with games, activities, ways to convert things, and how do you make them work in this virtual context. I mean, you see behind me in the wall here, I've got my games and all my stuff stacked here to bring out when I need to. So I think that what I did is said, okay, people need these resources. So I basically sat myself down and I wrote out, I said, can I come up with 101 things, activities? And I just wrote. And then I sorted them. And then I realized it's like, 101's too many. I can come up with about 75 good ones. And then there's a couple extras in there. So I quickly wrote and I published a book on Amazon, 75 Team Building Activities for Remote Teams. And then I've been running a program since earlier this year called the Pandemic Leadership Playbook, which was really about giving leaders tools that they can implement without spending more than 15 minutes of time a week preparing. Like, hey, what can I do in a second? I need an activity right now in a meeting. I need a question to start our next conversation. I need some way to be able to connect with people. I don't even know how people are doing when the camera's off. And so I've been spending my time giving people the resources and then also showing them how to use it.
That's talk about pivoting right in the moment is something that you obviously did very, very well, because I think, in my world, what's happening is a lot of people, they have the normal kind of issues related to running a team, and they have a little too much, work, not enough time, they try to have the FaceTime or the virtual kind of hybrids, but then there was maybe potentially some issues that developed that they hadn't addressed, and then they went into kind of lockdown, and those issues, to your point, it kind of stayed steady. But then when we realized there was no point of going back, that's when the people's mental health or mental well-being concerns came up. And how are we going to work together and get things done?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the part that, regardless of whether we're co-located or we're working remotely, right? In order to engage employees, you have to engage with them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like everybody in the field of employee engagement and workplace culture will all quote these Gallup stats and the engagement results, and companies in the top quartile are more productive, have less absenteeism and all that. But people don't ever look at what those questions are based on. Those results are based on Gallup's Q12 questions. And if you actually dig in and you look at those Q12 questions, what are they asking? And one of them will be, have I received recognition or praise in the last 7 days? And has somebody talked to me about my growth? But then the other ones are, do you have the tools and resources to do your job well? Does somebody at work seem to care about you as an individual? I'm trying to think of some of the other ones off the top of my head. But if you look at them, every single one of them requires the manager to actually engage with a person. And right now, do I have the tools and resources to do my job well? Well, that question is not just about, do I have a computer and fast internet? It's also, well, I've got a 4-year-old at home who's on the other side of this wall right here, and my wife works for the UN and she's on the other side of this wall, right? And we are all trying to manage that. And for me, in my context of Chile, we've been on government lockdown. We were for 2 months last year because of the revolution that was going on down here. Then we had a couple months off, and then the pandemic, and then we had another government lockdown. And so I, for 3 months, couldn't actually leave the apartment building. Like you could go to the store twice a week with a permit from the police. And now we're opened up and we can go out a little bit more and move around. But unless we understand what's going on for that other person, right? People tend to forget. Camera comes on, we immediately jump into work, and we forget that there's a human being that was doing something 5 minutes before, right? You and I met today at 10 past the hour. And that 10 past the hour is because my shift as dad ends at 2 and my wife takes over, but we have lunch. And what's realistic is, no matter if I say lunch is at 1:30 and we're going to sit down and eat, we're going to end up being late. And so instead of having you wait and say, hey, and tell you 10 minutes late, I'm just going to say 10 minutes past the hour, because then I guarantee I can be down, sitting down, ready to go. Right? And so I think now, if there was problems before, they're going to be amplified. But at the same time, leaders also have something that they never had before, which is a common struggle and a common dynamic. Everybody's facing the pandemic, but they're facing it from different circumstances, right? And so as long as we understand everyone's circumstances are different, it's an opportunity. It's like when, it's a horrible example, but when somebody loses a loved one or something tragic happens in the office, every time is an opportunity to be able to check in, where sometimes it's awkward to be able to say, hey, how are you doing? I don't know how to start the conversation. But if there's one of those kind of milestone moments or something that happens, we have a reason to check in. And so I think for leaders right now, it's less. And one of my favorite quotes is Mark Goldstein. If you know his book, Just Listen, and he has some phenomenal other work. He's a mentor of mine, and I interviewed him for a YouTube channel earlier this year. And one of the things that he said was, it's less important what we say to others. It's more important what we empower others to say to us. Right? And as leaders, it's really less about saying, okay, I need to say the right thing. What am I going to say today? Stop worrying about what you need to say. Just ask questions and listen. And don't worry about having to have the answer. Just understand what people are dealing with. And once you understand what they're dealing with, don't try to solve it. Just listen and take time to understand their world. And most of the times when you take time to understand the person's world and how your actions may be impacting it, that usually is the thing that's going to make the biggest difference.
But I think, I've written my second book. I actually did the same as you over the pandemic, and it's about authentic heart leadership. So I'm talking about the concept of leaders really taking the time to take care of themselves and to go into 100%. That space of awareness where they connect to little things that they could do often, right? I talk a lot about that with mental resilience. So, I talk about them, figuring out their breath or setting alarms on their phones, because of course, with people at that level, Chris, that they are functional and they come at, problems from their position from a high level, and they can endure and withstand a lot. And then you kind of put them in the context of everybody, like you said, you're like, just finishing lunch and kind of putting that buffer in. And I'm trying to think about, okay, I have to get, finish this coaching call and all those things. And we're shutting a lot of things. But when leaders are able to stop and really center themselves more often, what they're able to do is to get in contact with their internal world. And then they understand the energy that they impact the others around them. But if they're so stressed, if you think about this time, how are they, able to, like, to your point, to have that conversation where they're already saying, okay, Christopher, how are you really doing if they're so much worrying about the bottom line?
Yeah, and you can't take other people. One of the things in one of my workshops that I start out by saying is we're not leading remote teams and we're not working remotely. We're leading remote teams and working remotely in a pandemic. And I think it's easy the longer that we do this to forget that this isn't normal. And what we're having to process and deal with each day is not normal. And people were already stressed out and burnt out prior to the pandemic. And then you add this on top of it. Absolutely. And for some people, it's gotten easier. One of my articles in Forbes recently, I just said, what are the 3 questions you need to be asking your people right now? And we also need to be asking ourselves, right? How has life gotten harder for me since the start of the pandemic? How's my work gotten harder? Right, just to look at, because some things have gotten harder and for other people it's gotten easier, right? And then what things have gotten easier for me? What do I appreciate about working from home? And then what am I proud of that I've been able to do regardless of the circumstances? And by answering those 3 questions, we start to understand that. But to go back to your point about that whole one about being able to take care of ourselves is, it drives, I don't know about you, but it drives me nuts, all these articles like, 3 simple things to bring more joy and happiness to your life right now. I'm like, shut up. You're not at home with a 4-year-old. I can't meditate. The other day I tried to sit down and do yoga and literally my daughter was climbing on my back. She had a magnifying glass because she was pretending she was a detective and climbing underneath. Well, the cat is screaming for food at the same time. I'm like, you want me to carve out 15 minutes? I get it at 2 a.m. when everyone goes to sleep. That's not the reality. And like, there's no quick fix. Right. And so I think it's reminding yourself there's no quick fix. And what we have is we're running a race with no clear finish line. We're putting together a puzzle with no picture. And all we can do is take care of the runner right now and work with the pieces that we have today. Right. And like, what do I have today? Okay, I got an hour. I finished an article I had to get into Harvard Business Review yesterday. Today, I can clean the house and I can listen to my book on tape for an hour. Right. On tape. I don't think anyone has books on tape anymore, but you know what I'm talking about. Right. And what are those little things that I can incorporate into my day to take care of myself and then be able to stay in communication with the people that I am co-located with, meaning my wife, my daughter, and my cat, and also my coworkers about like, hey, here's what I can do right now today. And here's what I can't do. Right. Like being able, go ahead. Sorry.
So I'm curious, right? Like with the managers that you're supporting through this time, are they having that lens to be as transparent as you just were when you talked about your scenario? Do they have the skills, or are they demonstrating the skills to show that they are also going through this in their located space with their family? To be able to translate that to their teams or their frontline employees to say, hey, you know what, we're in this together. I'm lucky if I'm able, to your point, like to get off, get my work done before 2 o'clock so I can crash and get back up when the 5-year-old's up at 6 o'clock.
Well, we need to. Like some are doing it and some aren't. Some still feel like they've got to keep themselves together and hold this facade. But you can't really hold on the facade when a kid's breaking into your office in the middle of it, right? One of my favorite questions, and this is a great one for some of the leaders you work with, is to ask people, when you get on a call, what were you doing 5 minutes before? Because when you ask people what you were doing 5 minutes before, it immediately makes you get present to the world they're dealing with. Some people, I was just on another call. Somebody else will say, you know what, I was just making lunch for my family, or I was dealing with my kid in virtual school. And that also sparks a conversation to be able to understand what their world is and get you present as a leader to be empathetic what other people are dealing with. And I think the other one is early on in the pandemic, I wrote an article that's in Harvard Business Review called How to Be an Empathetic Remote Coworker. And everything in that was really about, and I interviewed a bunch of people for it, and I just asked people, like, what are you doing? And it's like, hey, if we try to pretend like we have it all together, like one of the elements in there is to not be perfect, to give people space, because, hey, my life's a mess most days. It is. If you looked at me 2 days ago, I had 3 deadlines I was trying to get. I had this article to get to finish. I'm buying a house right now. I'm going through all these things. And the truth is, I was going crazy. Now I'm great because I finished those 2 things and everything's fine right now. But 2 days ago, I could barely get through the day, you know? And I think that when we share that, it gives freedom to other people to not be perfect as well, because there's nothing that takes up more mental resources than to manage how we show up in front of other people, right?
That vulnerability is so important, right? I just watched Chris's TED talk, and I was laughing because it was so funny, because I was like, that realism that you bring, to your talks, it makes so much sense. And,
thank you.
It's one thing, we're all going through this, to your point, right? Like, I'm always dealing with mental resilience, and then people will say, well, what do you do? I says, well, I try my best to apply what I teach others, but sometimes I do horribly as well. And
sometimes I drink a lot of wine. Sometimes I drink
Right. And you have to really be real and say, some days I'm pretty good at it and some days I'm not so good, and I have to try again the next day. But with recognition, let's talk about your, your sweet spot. Like, so with everything going on, we don't have a timeline in mind. We don't know when, like you said, the quarter mile keeps, the mark keeps moving and moving and moving, and it's going to continue for a while. So how is it that you've been guiding managers and leaders to keep recognition going? I like the one thing that you said, pivoting to say, hey, Roxanne, what were you just doing? Allows you to connect with me on a surreal level, where I'm going to share something and you're going to be able to find some connection to be able to have a conversation, which is fantastic. I love that.
Yeah. So for me, when people think of recognition, they often think rewards and awards, right? They think of the plaques, they think of the employee of the month, they think of gift cards or points in their system or whatever their rewards platform is. So for me, when I relate to recognition, and one of my goals in life is to transform how people relate to giving and receiving recognition. And one of those is shifting the terminology. So one is that when I think of recognition, I actually break it down into components, right? There's appreciating the person, there's acknowledging circumstances, there's recognizing effort and progress, then there's rewarding results, and there's awarding standout results. And so I put it on this spectrum. And the goal of all of those actions are to ensure that people feel valued. So oftentimes people forget, it's like, oh, well, we need this recognition, we need to do this program. Well, why are we doing it? The goal is that people feel valued at work. That's the outcome they're trying to do. And they get value from their work, and they give value to their company or organization and their colleagues. And so inside that spectrum, you have appreciating the person, which right now is really the heart of it. And where many people put awards and rewards at the top, I actually invert the triangle here. So awards and awards are a teeny portion of it at the bottom. And some people may say it's the foundation, but what I want to do is the emphasis is the tools that managers have are their conversations and their dialogues and understanding what people are dealing with. That is the most powerful tool, and it costs nothing. And all it does is take a few minutes. The challenge is we get really uncomfortable with it, and we're not sure, and there's a lot of uncertainty around it, and we avoid the things that we're uncertain about, right? There's an emotional risk to engage in an unplanned, unscripted conversation with somebody, right? And so the same reason why we avoid giving feedback is the same reason why we avoid checking in, is the same reason why we avoid recognizing people, is because we're uncertain of how they will respond. But in that appreciating the person, it's just that reminder. And I recommend to leaders, I say, write down on a Post-it note over your mouse, put it down on your keyboard or on your mouse where you're going to move something around, and write, acknowledge the circumstances, acknowledge the person, right when you get on the call. That, hey, what were you dealing 5 minutes before? How are you doing? I want to do a check-in, and I'll share some possible check-ins, in a second here. But appreciating that person and everything they're dealing with inside of work and outside of work. Hey, if I don't know that person has kids on the other end, if I don't know that they have elderly parents, or if they're alone and they haven't been able to interact with people, we live internationally, and we have a lot of friends who are also expats who are away from family and have been quarantined in their house by themselves for 4 months.
Wow.
Solo, right? That's not good for anybody's health.
No, of course.
Sometimes I wish I could have at least 3 or 4 days like that.
You could just take like 1 or 2, like an afternoon.
For them yeah, exactly. Like, I would just love just a couple hours of that, just quiet time. It wasn't after 2 a.m. in the morning. So I think there's that element. And then there's acknowledging the circumstances. Like, hey, you know what? If there's noise in the back, if a kid busts in, If you get interrupted and you have to turn your camera off for a minute to be able to go take care of something, that's okay. And people may have said that back in March, but they've stopped saying it now. And the longer we go without acknowledging that, the more people shift into, well, maybe I can't do that. Right? And then there's the parents who are like, screw it, I have to do that. There's no other option, right? And then the element is recognizing the effort and progress is when I relate to recognition, there's recognition that we give to others. When I recognize Roxanne for something that you did that impacted me, that's one form of recognition. And then there's what I call interactive recognition or collaborative recognition, which is when I ask you, because I have no clue, Roxanne, what you are dealing with in your life when the camera's off. And as a leader, and I am not interacting, I have no clue what you're dealing with. I have no clue where you are, all the things you're facing, and what you deal with once you turn the camera off. And this is, by the way, the same as when we're in the office. We see the results. And as leaders, we try to point out things and find things to recognize in the results. I'm supposed to do this recognition thing, where what I'm about is about having a dialogue with that person to say, hey, it's maybe strange I'm asking this, but what are you proud of or what do you want to be acknowledged for? Because I don't know what's important to you. And then when I ask questions, you have an opportunity to share what you did, what you're proud of, and why you're proud of that thing. And then my job is just to listen to what matters to you and acknowledge you back for what you shared, but give you the opportunity to be able to share what you're proud of, to share what you've accomplished, to share what you're struggling with. And then listening to that and empowering you to be able to share that to me also builds connection with me. And then that person is usually left with the experience of feeling valued afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when people feel recognized, and I mean, in my career, I've been a manager several times, and I'm often struck, right? Because of course I'm a psychologist, so guess what? I know how to talk, I know how to connect, and when I filled the shoes of another leader who was, it was an unfortunate kind of situation, and I did simple things, which unfortunately as a leader entering into those shoes, it was not pretty, I tell you. It was not nice at first because they didn't trust me and they had no reason to trust me. And then as I would just go and do little things like constant, like, I'd go sit and say, how can I help today? Or, how's the unit running? I would talk about nothing and they would be like, oh, what's she up to? And then after a while, it took quite a while. What it started to make me realize is that because I was taking the time just to get to know them as people, not even talking about the job, it was amazing to watch the transformation because they were so, they could kind of just relax a bit and then just be themselves. And then I just kind of got out of the way and they were phenomenal at what they did, in their positions because they had brought such strength with them. And little things like I did something, it was a unit that I ran, an outpatient clinic, and something as simple, this is silly, simple, Chris. I bought red t-shirts at Christmas and I put our department name with a little logo with their names and something around Christmas. And I gave them each of those, and we went to lunch. Well, it was I probably spent $5 on those t-shirts maybe to get done. And they still talked about it years later.
And I think that this is there is nothing in life that when I think of examples, I think dying is the only thing you do once, right? Hopefully, right? Hopefully just once, right? But other than that, everything is building and maintaining, right? You're building a relationship and then you're maintaining it. When the pandemic hit, you know what? I stopped maintaining my health. I was drinking more. I was eating junk food. I was getting chips, all the time. I'd order it when we'd order food. And I gained a lot of weight really quick. And then I kept it off. And then I was working out every single day. And I got in the best shape I'd been in a long time. Well, a couple of weeks ago, we stopped working out. Guess what? The weight's coming back. And I think our relationships are the same way.
Absolutely.
If we're not doing those little things to signal to people. And I think that's what people don't realize is that our actions, our inactions are always sending signals to others. Where do I stand with them? How do they feel about my work? How do they feel about my contributions? And if I'm not sending those signals, right? It's not like you get married and you said, I love you just at your wedding and then you're done. Right? No, that's when the real work starts. That was the easy part, right?
Right.
Someone facilitating. And then the real work comes in when you actually go home and you got to be in a relationship, and especially when it struggles. And then you're in a pandemic and you're locked inside together. Then it really gets hard.
For sure.
But I think that but I think that it's those remembering that every single day is an opportunity to connect or disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, you know, my friend is works at Cornell in the Wheel School in psychiatry. I always get the two words mixed up, psychiatry, psychology, psychologist. He can give medication. I always forget.
He's psychiatry. He's psychiatry. I'm psychology. He's yes,
psychology,
yes.
psychiatry. I
Yeah.
always get the two mixed up. And he has a great line. He goes, if you're not building relationships, they're breaking down. Right. There's one or the other. Right. And so it's like those things you're saying, it's like, hey, I did these shirts, but also realizing that checking in just maybe, hey, thinking you today, if you need anything, I'm here. Text message in the morning.
Right.
But those nonstop signals to people, and then also knowing that there's some employees who don't want you to check in. Just give me my performance review at the end. And what I want is I want that 3% increase. And then I want to go home and I don't want to be doing anything with the team other than just doing my work, because I like to have that separation. But if we're not understanding what matters to people, we can't do and we can't deliver that.
But that's an individualistic fit. And I think your point is so well. Like some people say, give me the 3%. I'm all good. I'm the type, I'm a self-starter. I manage myself. I'm good to go. And then you have the other people that need to connect, you know, face to face, to just see how you're doing. But I think what happens with a lot of managers, they kind of think, okay, we're doing overall well. I think everybody, there's no disruptions. There's no role for me. And they don't take that extra little step just to check and say, is what I'm doing, has that been working for you? Or do I need to pivot it a bit? How do I need to adjust it? They may not ask those questions. So therefore they might be doing really, really a lot of work, but they might not getting the result that they're needing because they're not finding the right fit.
Yeah, and I think that's why we always have to be checking in. And there's the danger of the assumption that everything's going well. And I think right now, specifically in the pandemic, I think it's even harder. You know, I had an instance with my sister the other day who just called as we were getting on here. You know, she's, you know, I'm dealing with everything that I'm dealing with at home, and we're going through a move and all these things that we're dealing with. And she checks in on Monday morning. She goes, how was your weekend? I'm like, good. It was great. And then I realized, oh crap, she had shoulder surgery on Friday before. And I completely forgot about it, because the challenge is when we're so stressed out, it's hard to keep everybody else's stress and things that are going on. And when we're co-located and we see them, I see her in the sling. And it reminds me, oh God, how did it go? But if we don't have that vision, we don't have those reminders, we don't send those little cues to remember to check in, then we miss those things. And then the challenge is when we forget those interactions, it has an impact on others where they assume that our inaction is equal to not caring. Where our inaction
absolutely,
is literally many times just, oh my God, I can't believe this. She sent me a picture and then I was like horrified. Now I check in every 2 days. You know, like, how is it? How's this going? Because when you don't see those cues or you don't have something that reminds you, and I think for the leaders, there's some people that are just really on the ball about doing that. My wife's great. I'm not phenomenal. I see the messages. I see someone's LinkedIn birthday comes up and I'm like, okay, it's their birthday. I'll send them a message, check in. Or I was cleaning out my office last night and a Christmas card from a friend came up. I sent a message right then. It's more spontaneous, but when you have a team of 10, 15 people or 30 people, scheduling those check-ins once a month and putting them on the calendar saying, okay, I'm going to do 5 this week, 1 a day for 15 minutes. And then when you have those check-ins and everyone knows you're going to have those check-ins, then people know that they're going to have the opportunity to talk to you uninterrupted at some point in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
And I've done some interviews for my book, and I spoke to one CEO, and he had a smaller company, and he scheduled 5-minute touch points with everybody as things were shutting down. He said it was tough, but he said he just to say, and of course the CEO is calling you, so you're holding your breath, and he goes, hey, I'm just calling to say hi. I know this is a tough time for us, and we're going to get through this. We'll figure it out as a company. And he, you know, his assistants worked with it. It took him some time. So just those little things. And he said now they're in such a healthy place because people were like, wow, he actually cares about us. And, you know, he's having a rough, and he's sharing what he's going through as well as all of this is happening to his company. But those touch points. Now, you talked a little bit about some hacks that people can do really quickly. What are some of the little tips that people can do to?
Well, I think for, you know, when it comes to your virtual meetings, you know, some of the ones that are in the book, we can start there. So one is just starting your meetings, being conscious that how you start your meeting is probably one of the most important things. right? Is that initial check-in. And in the book, I recommend what I call the 1-6 rule. So for every hour of meetings, 1/6 of it should be devoted to relationship building. Maybe that's, and that's 10 minutes. Maybe it's 2 minutes in the beginning and check in the middle, or something in the end. And I recommend starting with connection before content and gratitude before goodbye, right? Is taking time to connect right in the beginning, and then making sure we say thank you before we leave. And so one way to just start is that when people join the call, simply ask, hey, what was everyone doing 5 minutes before today? And that usually sparks conversation. Using a welcome question. In the book, I have a list of 20 different questions there people can ask. You can use a gratitude prompt, something like that. There's 22 of those in the book. And then another one that I recommend a lot, and this has been probably one of the most popular ones I share, is pulse check questions. And so many times when we check in, if we just ask, hey, how's everybody doing? Most of the time, people don't really care.
Right.
And so they just move on. I'm good. The truth is we're not good. We're dealing with a mess at home and everything's a wreck. And underneath my desk is all the stuff I don't want you to see in the back right now. Literally. And so I think that what we can do is then ask questions, what I call pulse check questions. So on a 1 to 10 scale, how are you feeling about your ability to be able to handle everything at work and home right now? 10, I got this, to 1, if you give me one more thing, I'm going to collapse. And then if there's a lot of people on the call, people can put it into the chat, or they can put it up on their hands and show people, right? But then that way I do a numerical value to explain my circumstances, and then it's easier to explain out from that. And so as a leader, if I see people with 7 or below, it's a signal to me to just be like, okay, I need to check in with Roxanne. She was at like a 4 today.
Right.
Hey, I just want to check in. How are you doing? And then the follow-up question, if it's just a one-on-one, or, I can invite a couple people to share, hey, why did you pick the number you did? And is there anything you, I, or the team can do to help bring that number up? Many times the reason why we're at a 4 is nothing to do with work and has to do with what we're dealing with at home.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. But that's a simple thing that we can do to check in. You're going to say something today.
Well, it's so true, because in the employee assistance world, 65% of any concerns that are happening at work is related to home. So it bears out, right? Because, right. So you can imagine what those numbers look like now, right? So to your point, so actually having people quantify, really, instead of glossing over the topics at hand, you're having them actually say where they are. You're tracking that as the manager, just to say, okay, I'm going to note this. Chris is a little bit lower. Roxanne's a little bit this, that, or the other. And you're just kind of keeping that pulse of where they're at, so you can have more of a constructive conversation to say, is there something I can be helping you with, or what's really going on for you, without getting, if it's more than just something not related to work, you would have a bit of a conversation, and then there's resources if it's really personal, but you're letting them know that you're there for them.
Yeah, and you're just taking time to check in an alternative way, and using a different question so that people have an opportunity to connect about something. You can play games on the phone. Some of the one of my favorite ones, and it's probably the most popular one, is virtual Have You Ever, right? And if you've ever played the game Have You Ever, someone will say, have you ever done this? And if you have, you turn your camera on. And if not, you leave your camera off. And it's fun and virtually to be able to do that. And it's, have you ever hidden things under your desk to make it look like your office is cleaner than it is? Have you ever completely forgotten about a meeting, and then the person's like, are you going to join the call? And you're like, oh yeah, I was just getting on. And then you didn't even know who the person was or what the meeting was, right? And just to be able to joke and laugh about our circumstances. Because if we can't laugh about it, and in your world too, is that laughter triggers that parasympathetic nervous system, triggers us into rest and recover. And it's what we can do, because right now, nothing is going to address the uncertainty that we're facing in our life. But I
love the gratitude part you're talking about, because that really connects us. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That really connects us into the heart. And then when we get connected to really what's important, right? Or even like, whether it's like you're telling the funny story about your daughter climbing all over you and she's a detective, that really, really sets us at a good place. Or to go to laughter, to your point, right? Like these are things that I think, unfortunately, are getting lost even more, because people are under so much more stress.
Well, and it's, I don't have time to take care of myself. That's how I feel most days. I don't have time. I'm like, I just want to disconnect. And I think that's a part, is that, most of the self-help world drives me nuts, because it's so focused on quick fixes. And the truth is, there's no quick fix, but what little thing can I do that will make a difference for me right now, right? Who are the people that I enjoy talking to, that I leave invigorated after I talk to them?
Right.
What is it I watch on YouTube that afterwards I smile, right? Because most of that knowledge is going in. The article that I just submitted that hopefully will be in Harvard Business Review in the next couple of months, hopefully sooner than that, but was about how do we trigger gratitude. And it's a piece that I'd done before that we reworked for the main site. And it's literally that reminder that, gratitude, it's not going to resolve the uncertainty of what's going on right now, but what it will do is help us cope with the impact of the uncertainty. Right. And that little practice of just bookending our day, Jay Ellard, who runs Simple Intentions, phenomenal programs around resiliency. And, she says, just bookend your day with a little bit of gratitude, taking a minute to stop and meal and just like, I really appreciate. And she shared, it was very vivid for me, the fresh pomegranates I had on my cereal this morning. It tasted amazing. Or I'm just grateful for my body today because I had back issues before and today I'm walking fine. Right. And by taking those moments to be able to do that and just smile about something and just laugh about something, I mean, you know what? It's literally just maintaining that mental diet so we don't get that emotional indigestion from digesting US politics, Canadian politics, whatever, all the time. Anybody would get sick if they eat that greasy burger every single day. And so I think it's just thinking about like, hey, I'm conscious of what I put into my body food-wise, but am I conscious of what I'm putting into my mind? And just being aware of that and then thinking about, hey, you know what? I've been eating a lot of junk food lately. It's time to counter with something else, which may be just turning my phone off and doing something with my hands, or it may be thinking about what I'm consciously putting in and how that makes me feel by directing my attention to that, which is a contribution to my life.
This all sounds so good. I'm sure that people listening are thinking, of little things that they can start implementing, say, tomorrow. So if there are people that are, and I know we could probably spend a lot more time, but I know we have to wrap up. But if, let's say, a leader's listening and he's saying, oh, my teams aren't doing so well, what are some things that they can do tomorrow to start getting them back on track?
I think so one of the ones is on my if you go to beyondthankyou.com/book, I have a little team self-assessment, and it's just a 10-question thing to be able to ask and kind of do a pulse check on really the emotional safety. Ask questions like, do I feel safe to speak up if I need help? If I have a conflict with somebody, how comfortable do I feel to address it head on, or do we avoid it? And I think for a leader, I think a good thing to do is to be able to go and just do a pulse check of where are you at with your team? And then based on that, I recommend some stuff. I think that if your team, if things have been a little toxic lately, you don't want to bring your whole team together for discussion right away. You actually, as a leader, want to go and interview people and understand what their experience has been first. Though I think you start with the one-on-ones. And then if things have been going good and we just haven't had time to check in, is I think that many times people are putting off performance reviews, having reviews and conversations right now. We'll do it when we're back to the office. Hell no, do it now. Have those conversations. Those are the things that are going to make the biggest difference. Don't keep on waiting to return to the office because you create more uncertainty about how people are doing. Have those conversations now, because really it's not about the games. The games just can help support creating the container that makes it safe to have the conversations that really make a difference. People always look at me and be like, oh, Chris, you're in team building. I'm like, yeah, I do all those games just to make it safe so we can have the conversation that you guys have been avoiding having. Right? I ran a retreat for a team recently, and they were all, they're dealing with a lot of tents. There's a lot of tents. They're overloaded with work right now. It's great. And we actually just facilitated a process, and we played the games so that we could jump into the real conversation and address the issues that nobody wanted to talk about because no one wanted to give feedback to each other. And once we made it safe to talk, so those games are in there. And one of the other ones it's if you go to Forbes and you Google Chris Littlefield Forbes, there's how to run a virtual retreat. And I give a whole process to be able to organize a virtual retreat in under an hour. Everything you need in there to be able to do it. And then if you email me, I have a form that literally gives you an outline to be able to do that. And I think that right now, it's just a matter of that hour, carve out 10 minutes to connect, right? And then every 6 meetings, 1 meeting should be devoted solely to relationship building. So if you have meetings every 6 weeks, 1 week, just relationship building. And I think if you take that time and carve out time to build relationships, then I think you won't be dealing with as many of the issues that you get because you've been avoiding it. It's like when we're sick, right?
It's all about, yeah, of course. And it's all about taking those little incremental times. It doesn't have to be a big epiphany, but to do it as consistently as you have, just to make sure that what's your pulse, what's happening for you? Am I getting Chris? He seems off? What's happening for him? And then just relationship, which is all that I talk about. Now, Chris, if people are wanting to connect with you, with events or coaching with you, where might they reach you?
You can find me at beyondthankyou.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Christopher Littlefield, and then also on YouTube under Christopher Littlefield as well. And so those are the three primary places that I spend the most of my time. And then if you want to see articles, just Google Littlefield Harvard Business Review or Littlefield Forbes, and a lot of my pieces will come up there. And on the self-care side, I also have some pieces that are up on Thrive Global. I think they're still up there. I haven't written for them in a long time, but there's some there that are more on the self-care side of things, but on the leadership side of it, beyondthankyou.com. And it's a bunch of resources. And every 2 weeks, I send out a mailing with literally practical tools, activities, resources that you can do in your virtual meetings and also once you're back in the office as well.
Awesome. Well, this has been amazing. Happy packing. I know you've done well.
Thank you.
Can't see what's under your desk, but that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We won't put the camera underneath. It's actually not bad. Last night I did all the dumping.
It looks pretty good. It looks pretty good there.
It's not doing too bad. So I still have a couple months before I move, but I'm just trying to get it done because things are going to get busy work-wise. But Roxanne, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for the opportunity to be able to share with your community, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. And for everybody listening, connect. If you don't know where you're at and you're needing some support around getting connected to yourself as a leader, you can reach me at roxannedurhodge.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannedurhodge.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.